The divine descent, why God awakens your darkness before he reveals your light. There's a part of the journey no one wants to talk about. The part that doesn't look beautiful on Instagram. The part no one claps for. The part where everything falls apart. Not because you did something wrong, but because something deeper is being made right. We all say we want to awaken, to evolve, to step into our highest self. But what we forget is that before light floods your being, God awakens the darkness you've buried inside you. Not to punish you, not to destroy you, but to liberate you. And if you've found yourself in a season of confusion, heaviness, emotional chaos, or spiritual fatigue, it might not be a breakdown. It might be a breakthrough in disguise. It might be that God in infinite wisdom is awakening the darkest part of you, not to shame you, but to set you free. If you're ready, we're going to go into the deepest places of your soul together. We're not here to sugarcoat this. We're here to walk into the fire and come out forged. The first sign that God is awakening the darkest part of you is that your identity starts to fall apart. Not just your job, your relationship, or your goals, but the you thought you were. You no longer feel like the person you used to be, and yet the version of you that you're becoming hasn't fully arrived either. It's an identity death, and it's terrifying, but it's holy, because you cannot carry your old self into your new destiny. So God begins to strip away the masks, the ego structures, the attachments. He removes what you thought defined you so he can reveal what actually is you. This process is not gentle, but it is sacred, because in that void, you begin to ask questions you've never asked before. Who am I without the titles, without the applause, without the external validation? And that's when you begin to hear the whisper underneath all the noise. You are mine. You've always been mine. So ask yourself, are you willing to lose who you thought you were in order to discover who God knows you to be? The second sign is emotional chaos, deep, raw emotions that rise without warning. You might find yourself crying for no reason, raging in silence, feeling grief for things you thought you'd already healed. This is not regression. This is revelation. When God awakens the darkest part of you, he doesn't just touch your intellect, he touches your wounds. And what rises is not just what happened to you. It's what you believed about yourself because of what happened. I'm not enough. I'm unlovable. I'm broken. These unconscious narratives begin to surface so that they can be seen, felt, and released. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Because the pain you don't feel is the pain you pass on to others, to your purpose, to your own future. So God in his mercy brings it all up, not to drown you in it, but to baptize you through it. The question is, when the flood of emotion comes, will you numb it, suppress it, or will you meet it with holy curiosity and ask, what is this here to teach me? The third sign is that your external world begins to collapse in ways you didn't expect. Things break, relationships end, plans fall through. The foundation you thought was solid begins to crack, and it feels like betrayal. It feels like abandonment. But what if it's neither? What if it's surgical precision? What if God is removing what can't go with you into the next season? What if he's letting what's false fall away so that what's real can rise? When God awakens the darkest part of you, he also removes the scaffolding you used to keep yourself standing. Because he wants you to know you were never meant to be held up by them. You were always meant to be anchored in him. So when the storm comes, don't ask, why is this happening to me? Ask what false security is being dismantled so I can finally stand in truth. The collapse is not the end. It's the beginning of actual freedom. The fourth sign is isolation. Not loneliness, but divine isolation. People pull away. Conversations feel shallow. You stop being able to relate to the groups or communities that once made you feel safe. You feel like you're being pulled into a cave with God, and no one else is allowed in. This can feel like punishment, but it's actually preparation. Because when God wants to speak to you directly, He will silence every other voice. He will remove the noise. He will take you to the wilderness, not to crush you, but to commune with you. It's in the wilderness that identity is reborn. It's in the silence that purpose is revealed. It's in the aloneness that the deepest intimacy with the divine is forged. So if you're in a season where it feels like everyone is leaving, remember this. Sometimes God isolates you because your destiny is too big to be built in public. Ask yourself, am I willing to be alone for a while, if it means being aligned forever? The fifth sign is that your inner world becomes louder than your outer world. You start noticing your thoughts more. Your self-talk becomes obvious. The unconscious patterns you used to ignore start screaming for attention. This is not a mental breakdown. This is spiritual awakening. God is turning the lights on in the dark room of your mind. He's showing you the ways you've been hard on yourself, the ways you've agreed with lies, the ways you've internalized shame. And He says, no more. He wants to renew your mind. He wants to clean the temple. But first, He has to show you what's been living there. So don't run from the inner noise. Sit with it, listen to it, and then ask, whose voice is this? Is this God's truth? Or is this an old wound pretending to be wisdom? Because until you can recognize the counterfeit, you'll never fully receive the authentic. The sixth sign is that your desires begin to shift. What once excited you now feels empty. What used to drive you now feels hollow. You may even lose passion for the goals that once defined your life. This is a sacred disillusionment. God is removing the bait of the ego so He can reveal the blueprint of your soul. He's not making your life meaningless, He's showing you what matters. This can feel like a void, like you're floating, like you don't know what you want anymore. But don't rush to fill the gap. Let the false desires die. Let the old ambitions dissolve, because only then can the true vision emerge. And when it does, it won't be powered by ego, it will be anointed by purpose. So ask yourself, what have I been chasing that God is gently asking me to release? And what would I create if I stopped needing it to impress anyone? The seventh and final sign is that you begin to experience spiritual hunger like never before. You crave silence. You long for truth. You weep and worship. You yearn for something deeper, realer, more eternal. This hunger is not weakness, it's an invitation. God is awakening your spirit. He is calling your soul home. And the darkness you've walked through wasn't a detour, it was a doorway. It was never about breaking you. It was about breaking open the places where His light had been locked out. Now you're ready. Now you're open. Now you're emptied enough to be filled. So the only question that remains is this: will you say yes to the awakening, even if it means facing your shadows before you can stand in the sun? Because this is the paradox we must all face. Before God blesses what you do, He transforms who you are. And that transformation often starts by awakening the darkest part of you. Not to destroy, but to deliver. Not to shame, but to sanctify. And when you walk through that valley, when you face the shadows, when you allow yourself to be undone by the truth, you emerge as something unshakable. Not because you avoided the darkness, but because you invited God into it. The wilderness within. What happens after God breaks you to rebuild? When God begins to awaken the darkest part of us, it feels like devastation. But in truth, it's a divine excavation. It's the moment where the old structure, the ego-built identity, the trauma-shaped worldview, the false safety nets begin to crumble. And after the crumbling comes the wilderness, the in-between, the place where you're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. And this is where most people give up. Not because they're weak, but because they don't understand what the wilderness really is. It's not punishment. It's purification. It's not delay. It's design. God takes you into the wilderness not to abandon you, but to reintroduce you to yourself. The version of you that was never defined by pain, titles, or performance. The version of you that remembers its origin in the divine. And the only way to recover that self is to walk through the silence. In the wilderness, your distractions disappear. You can no longer numb the pain with noise. You can't reach for the same habits, the same people, the same validations you used to. You're forced to sit with yourself. And that's when the real spiritual work begins. You begin to see the parts of you that operated on fear, the ways you've been addicted to being in control, the subtle ways you manipulated life to avoid surrender. These realizations are brutal, but they are sacred, because until you see them, you will keep repeating them. God allows the wilderness to stretch you emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, so that when you emerge, you are real. You are grounded. You are no longer performing for love, you're living from it. So let me ask you, what patterns are breaking in your life right now? And are you resisting them, or are you learning from them? Eventually, the wilderness becomes a mirror. It shows you everything you thought you wanted, and whether it actually aligns with your soul. The ambitions that were born from ego no longer excite you. The relationships that once made you feel validated now feel draining. The goals you wrote in your planner begin to seem empty. This isn't failure. This is clarity. You are not losing direction. You are losing illusion. And it hurts because we were taught to chase things that look good, not things that feel true. But when you let those illusions go, something incredible happens. You begin to hear God clearly, not through thunder, not through visions, but through a quiet knowing, a divine whisper, a sacred pull towards something deeper, something real, something eternal. And that whisper will never scream for your attention. You have to become still enough to hear it. So ask yourself, are you willing to release the life you thought you wanted in order to receive the one God designed for your soul? One of the hardest parts of this kind of awakening is realizing that not everyone will walk with you into your rebirth. Some people are assigned to your wounds, not your healing. Others are attached to your ego, not your essence. And as you begin to evolve, you will feel the friction. Conversations will no longer click. People will distance themselves, not because they're bad, but because your frequency no longer matches theirs. This is part of the spiritual price. You will outgrow people, places, and patterns. And it will feel lonely, but that loneliness is not a void. It's a womb. It's where God births your next chapter. So instead of chasing people who no longer see you, get still, get present. Let God bring souls who match your new vibration. And ask yourself, who am I still trying to hold on to simply because I'm afraid of walking alone? Another thing that happens in the wilderness is the resurfacing of old pain. Things you thought were healed come back with a vengeance. Childhood wounds start speaking louder. Traumas you buried re-emerge like ghosts. And you might think, I thought I was past this, but you're not being punished. You're being invited to go deeper, to feel what you never gave yourself permission to feel, to express what you once silenced, to reclaim the parts of you that you abandoned just to survive. This is deep soul surgery. It's not easy, but it's holy. Because what you fully feel, you finally free. And when you stop running from pain, you start turning it into power. So the next time the old wound bleeds again, don't judge it. Don't suppress it. Ask, what part of me still needs my love, my presence, and my voice? What if this pain is the doorway to my wholeness? In the wilderness, you will also be tested, not by God in the way religion taught us, but by life itself. You will be offered shortcuts. You will be tempted to go back to what's familiar. You will be seduced by the illusion of safety. But every test carries a question. Are you willing to trust the unseen path even when it's slower, harder, and lonelier? Because the wilderness is not about speed. It's about surrender. It's about whether you can walk when there is no map, whether you can obey a voice that only you can hear, whether you can keep moving when the world calls you crazy. The wilderness is where warriors are forged, not the kind that fight others, but the kind that refuse to betray their own soul. If you're walking through the fire, don't pray for an escape. Pray for endurance, because what's on the other side is not just a new life, it's a new you. And finally, something miraculous happens. After the breakdowns, after the silence, after the shedding and the solitude, you begin to feel peace. Not the peace that comes from having answers, but the peace that comes from no longer needing them. You begin to feel joy, not because life is perfect, but because you are whole. You begin to feel presence, not as a forced practice, but as your natural state. This is what the wilderness was creating in you all along: alignment. You no longer need validation, applause, or clarity to feel grounded. You've become the mountain. You've become the stillness. You've become the prayer. And now you're ready, not just to receive a blessing, but to embody it. Not just to hear God, but to become a vessel for Him. And when that happens, everything changes, not because the world changed, but because you did. Becoming the flame, how the darkest awakening turns you into the light itself. Eventually, something shifts. Something subtle, but irreversible. You wake up one day and realize you're not the same. The pain didn't disappear, but it transformed. The questions didn't get answered, but they stopped controlling you. The wounds didn't vanish, but they became windows. Windows through which God's light now pours. You see the world differently. You see yourself differently. Because when God awakens the darkest part of you, it's not just to expose the shadow, it's to reveal the light you've been carrying all along. And that light, it's not for show. It's not for status. It's fuel. It's fire. It's your purpose, set ablaze. You begin to move differently. You speak with fewer words, but more weight. You walk with less striving, but more presence. People around you feel it. They don't know what changed, but they know they've encountered someone who's been through the fire and came out glowing. And here is the paradox. The more you become light, the more you're drawn toward the dark places in others. Not to fix them, not to preach at them, but to see them, to sit with them, to stand as a mirror that says, you are not your trauma, you are not your fear, you are not your failures. This is the sacred work you were being prepared for all along. Your pain didn't just break you, it initiated you. Your wilderness didn't just isolate you, it trained you. And now you're not just someone who believes in healing. You embody it. You carry it in your silence, in your presence, in your choices. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to convince anyone. You are the proof. You are the walking testimony that God doesn't just pull people out of darkness, He teaches them how to glow inside it. You begin to realize that the goal was never to escape the darkness. It was to become someone who could carry light into it. And so now, the questions change. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And you start asking, how am I meant to serve because of this? That's when the anointing drops. That's when your life stops being about survival and starts becoming about service. You don't need a stage. You don't need a spotlight. Your life itself becomes the sermon. Your healed heart becomes the sanctuary. Your tears become holy water for others who are still walking through the valley. That's why the darkness had to touch you, because what you've been through has tenderized your soul. It's made you available to God in a way that comfort never could. So ask yourself, now that I've walked through my own darkness, whose light can I help ignite? Whose pain can I hold with grace? And don't be surprised when you begin to attract people who are in the very place you once were. That's not coincidence. That's calling. That's alignment. They don't need someone perfect. They need someone real. Someone who doesn't flinch when the darkness shows up. Someone who can say, me too, and I'm still here. You become the space others didn't have. You become the hand you once reached for in the dark. And that's when it hits you. Your healing was never just about you. It was about everyone connected to your obedience. Everyone who would be set free because you said yes to the fire. Yes to the unraveling. Yes to the wilderness. And yes to becoming the flame. So let me ask you this, what if the very thing you thought disqualified you is the thing God will use to deliver others? You start to notice that your old triggers don't control you anymore. Your emotions still rise, but they don't run you. You feel anger, but it doesn't burn you. You feel fear, but it doesn't freeze you. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but the integration of it. You become emotionally sovereign, spiritually grounded, not because you've mastered life, but because you've surrendered to it. You stop needing to control everything. You stop trying to fix people. You stop chasing outcomes, and you begin to trust the divine rhythm. Even when it's slow, even when it's silent, even when it doesn't make sense. Because when you've walked through your own darkness with God, you don't just believe in Him, you know Him. And that knowing becomes your compass. That knowing becomes your peace. That knowing becomes your fireproof. And then, something even more beautiful happens. You begin to thank the darkness, not because it was easy, not because it was fair, but because it formed you. You stop resenting what broke you. You start revering it, because you see now it didn't break you to harm you, it broke you open. It cracked the shell around your soul. It burned away what was false. It stripped you down to the truth. And now you're not just someone who believes in transformation, you embody it. You carry the scent of the fire, yes, but also the glow of resurrection. And that glow, it's not for performance. It's for presence. It's for purpose. It's the divine signature that says this one has been forged. This one has been touched. This one carries eternity in their bones. So what now? What do you do after you've become the flame? You keep walking. You keep serving. You keep loving. You keep burning. Not with the fire of ego, but with the fire of truth. You live every day as a sacred offering. You let your words heal. You let your silence speak. You let your life preach. And when the darkness comes again, because it will, you don't run. You don't panic. You remember. You remember who you are. You remember who walks with you. And you remember You've already been through the fire. Now, you are the fire.